Chicago Cubs are flailing.
Wow.
Yeah,
It,
I was
it, it,
all
this is my optimistic and you're pessimistic. Those are my stats.
yeah, they did finally beat the Cardinals last night, which was merciful. Finally, the struggling Cardinals, which we'll actually get to here in a bit. But yeah, the Cubs have lost 12 of their last 18. And the saddest part is it's coming against really mediocre competition with the Marlins. They had two series with the Marlins. They got swept in one of them.
Nationals.
Yeah, they lost to the Nationals. So and the Cardinals came into town very much struggling. I just I'm surprised considering how well they played against top competition earlier in the year. It's just frustrating that they're actually struggling against the lower end of the leagues. The other most frustrating part of watching the Cubs these days is they have left on base the most number of players. I think it's like 276 runners left on base, leading the major leagues.
Wow, is the Sox in second? Or
I didn't look up the Sox. I was kind of surprised to hear that, but yeah, I'm assuming the White Sox are not far behind. But
Chicago owns runners left on base.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a frustrating view right now. The big news, I guess, in the last week are all the call-ups. Matt Mervis was finally called up after mashing all over the International League and AAA. He hasn't done a whole lot since his call-up last week. I think his OPS is like around 400, which is not remarkable.
That's near Jose Abreu's this season.
Yeah. What is remarkable is Christopher Morel's call-up, who we got a taste of last year. Eventually kind of looked overmatched, but his energy is unquestioned. His production so far, at least in AAA to start, 29 games. He has 31 RBI, like an 1100 OPS, nine doubles, two triples, 11 home runs. It's like they had to call him up eventually. Finally called him up 2 nights ago. In 8 at bats, he's got a 1500 OPS, home run, 3 RBIs, stolen base. So at least in 2 games, he's looking interesting and fun. We'll see how long that lasts. But the other call up was Miguel Amaya, who I've talked about for years as being the heir apparent to one Willson Contreras, who we'll definitely get to here in a moment. He was called up mainly or essentially because Yan Gomes went on the concussion IL and who returned yesterday, actually. So Amaya was sent back down, but he looked decent. He wasn't sent down because he wasn't productive. He looked like he knew what he was doing and ready to go. We've been waiting for a long time for Miguel Amaya as he went through, I believe he had Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago. So his development has been delayed. But that was good to see. But the real news of the week is definitely the return of Willson Contreras to Wrigley Field. And it comes at a bizarre time in not only Willson Contreras' career, but certainly the St. Louis Cardinals history. As for the first time that I can remember, they look like an organization in complete disarray, as they have a record. I didn't look up what the record is today, but it's reminiscent of the White Sox. Well, double digits below 500. They seem like a very confused organization, especially when you learn that they have demoted their free agent star catcher, Willson Contreras, who they just signed to a 5-year, $87.5 million deal. Demoted him out of the catcher's position, to which they initially announced he would be in the outfield or a DH. And subsequently, the next day, that information was refuted as he will not be in the outfield. He will only be the Cardinals DH for now. 1 month into the season, they have already decided that realized that Willson Contreras is not Yadier Molina, which is astounding to me, as the St. Louis Cardinals organization has been telling us for 20 years there is no one like Yadier Molina. Especially with Contreras playing in the division against them 19 times a year, you'd think they would know exactly what they were getting when they signed Contreras to that big deal as a 30-year-old. And you and I have talked about this for years. Love the player, love Contreras, his energy. I really love the kind of ancillary aspects to his defense, his energy, his back picks. But he's not the best pitch framer by any means.
No.
Game calling has always been questionable, as we've heard, different pitchers like Yu Darvish and John Lester wanted to go with a different catcher, did not want him catching them. Suddenly, this is all just a major surprise to the Cardinals. They were not prepared for this whatsoever. They did not understand that Contreras could not necessarily just step in and be the next Yadier Molina, which is just baffling. And that they're pulling the plug on him being the catcher indefinitely 30 days into his 5-year deal is hilarious and very uncharacteristic of the Cardinals.
Yeah, you're right.
I hate the Cardinals, but I respect them. They've been a well-run organization for my entire life, essentially. They're after the worst start in 50 years. Your and I's lifetime, since the early 70s, they've never been this bad. And now they're making just bizarre decisions left and right like this, not to mention they've already demoted their top prospect. I think you picked him to be rookie of the year, actually. I forgot his name. It's a Jalen Walker, something like that, but
Logan Walker,
something like that. But
Lone Wolf McQuaid.
It's just funny to see the Cardinals just in complete disarray, just confused. Ali Marmol, their contentious manager, has made headlines many times already this year for various odd things happening, and they just seem to be in a spiral. What's frustrating about that is somehow they still found a way to beat the Cubs twice at Wrigley Field this week. So that's the center of my frustration, I guess. But I don't know. Did you have any thoughts about our much discussed Willson Contreras over the years?
I wasn't. I, like you, am surprised. Like, it's like the Cardinals did no homework on him. Yeah. They just said, "Oh, we heard he's good. he's demanding big money. Let's sign him." I'm just, like you said, I'm surprised that the Cardinals look so
kind of blindsided almost.
Yeah, like just they're a very well-oiled machine, and they look like it's completely coming apart. Like the train is off the rails, and it's a freaking disaster.
You and I talked about Contreras many times, saying, my whole thing was I wouldn't have minded the Cubs re-signing him, but I was not going to give him a 5-year deal. As a 30-year-old catcher, you knew he was going to be the DH sooner than later.
That was the thing. Like I
knew it, and somehow the Cardinals didn't know.
I said I don't mind giving Contreras. I said I don't mind giving Contreras a 5-year contract with the idea that I'm not signing him to be my starting catcher. Yeah, that was my thing.
I wasn't interested in signing a DH for 5 years. I was going to sign him for 2 years as a catcher and see how that went, and then give him another deal if his body was still holding up. But it's just hilarious to me that you and I discussed this very thing that the Cardinals seem completely blindsided by. So
yeah, apparently we can be the GM of a major organization.
Well, we've often thought that. Now we're starting to get some evidence that we might be a little more competent than the actual people that run this shit. So
yeah,
just too funny.
He was the spoiler though of Game 1, so he got booed. He got booed pretty badly when.
Yeah, he loved it. He had his yellow gloves up in the air, soaking it all in. He had some, kind of disparaging comments about the Cubs, which you can't blame. There's got to be some acrimony there, as I'm sure he wanted to stay in Chicago, and the Cubs decided not to bring him back. So I could see why he'd be upset. And I'm kind of annoyed that Cubs fans booed him, considering what he did for the organization over his time there. But I think it was those comments that may have sparked that. But yeah, he had a nice game. I think he ended up having 3 RBI over the series. Not like a devastating, maybe had 3 hits, 3 RBI, something like that. But
yeah.
But of course he gets the last laugh this week, at least, as the Cardinals won the series.
Word Hole Media.